Silence for the victims of Aberfan. Schools and communities bowed their heads to remember the 116 children and 28 adults killed here in the disaster 50 years ago. It was a tragedy that affected everyone in this village and way beyond. Hundreds worked together that day, desperately searching for survivors. One mother's pain half a century on, as she remembers the moment she gave up hope of finding her daughter alive.
He called out to me, he said, "Madeline, she's gone," and I just sort of collapsed and I cried.
I'll be live in Aberfan for this special lunchtime news.
Also ahead on the programme, 15 years for the fake shake. The undercover reporter is jailed over a pop star's collapsed drugs trial. And one awkward dinner party. Trump and Clinton take their sparring on stage to a charity gala.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Mary Nightingale in Aberfan and Nina Hussain in the studio.
Good afternoon from Aberfan, the Welsh village where 50 years ago today, untold tragedy unfolded. At 9:15 a.m, 150,000 tonnes of coal waste slid down a mountainside and onto the local junior school. The pupils of Pantglas were starting their lessons. There was no time to escape. 116 of them were killed that day, buried alive by the landslide. 28 adults lost their lives too. 50 years ago, the weather was very different from today, misty and wet after weeks and weeks of relentless rain. Today, it's bright and sunny, and I'm standing just a few feet from the Remembrance Garden, which was created on the site of the junior school, which was so devastated on that terrible day. Half a century on from the 21st of October 1966, the community here and right across Wales stood still this morning to remember those victims and to remember the families who suffered over the decades since and who still grieve today. Prince Charles is in this village right now, paying his own respects. He's visited the Aberfan Memorial Garden this lunchtime. And for our first report, our correspondent Rupert Evelyn on today's 50-year anniversary.
Silence in the valley that lost a generation. 50 years on, it still scars the lives of so many people. At the Memorial Garden where Pantglas School once stood, at the exact same time the colliery tip swept it away, a minute to remember. The very same bell that once rang out in the playground of Pantglas School is still in use at school in Aberfan. Today's students paying their own respects to those who died. A flower for each of the 144 men, women and children who lost their lives, crushed and buried by an unstoppable wave of colliery waste. Witnesses described it as sounding like a jet plane as the waterlogged spoil from Tip 7 rushed down the hillside and into the village. The children had only been in school for 15 minutes. It was the day before half-term. Heroically, desperately, people did what they could. Tragically, no one was rescued alive more than 2 hours after it happened. Philip Thomas was buried alive but survived. By chance, he'd been sent out of school by his teacher on an errand. Almost all of his friends died.
I do think a lot on the anniversaries of children that didn't survive. And yeah, it is sad, it is, you know. And I go up to the cemetery and I'll have a walk around the arches. And it brings little memories back of the ones that were in my class. So yeah, you know, anniversaries are hard.
They should never have died, but the inquiry found the National Coal Board had brushed aside warnings about the stability of the tip. Repeatedly fears had been raised, but officials ignored them. The cost of inaction was catastrophic, and although the physical scars have been taken from this valley, there is a dark shadow that rests in its heart. Rupert Evelyn, ITV News, Aberfan.
For parents in this village, October the 21st, 1966 began like any other Friday. Marilyn Brown got her children, Robert and Jeanette, up and ready for school. And she's told ITV News her memories of that morning and then what followed.
Jeanette was a little bit upset because she didn't want to go to school. And I went to see her off, as I do every morning. And she looked back at me when she was going to school. I must just say, "Oh, you're making me go to school." But they went, and I went indoors, and I thought, oh, thank goodness for that. Now I'm going to have a nice cup of tea, piece of toast, relax. My nephew, who was working not far away, he knocked the door, came running in, and he said, "There's something wrong, something radically wrong." He said, "Something had happened to the school." I got up to the school. Somebody had already told me that Robert was okay. So I was happy with that. I thought, oh, well, that's okay, they'll all be coming out. It never entered my head that they wouldn't. My husband was up there, he was working up there and doing what he could, but not knowing anything, not having any news. It was left to your imagination, really. They had to go and identify the children, obviously. So my husband went, my father, and when they came back down, my father said, "I'm sorry, Jeanette have gone." I said, no. I couldn't believe it then. And he said, "Marilyn," and he called out to me, he said, "Marilyn, she's gone." And I just sort of collapsed and I cried. The first time we went out, everything was so quiet. And then all of a sudden, then the children, you had to let the children do what they do, play. And that sort of came out very slowly, you know. I think people were afraid to leave the children go out, really. 50 years now, because it's the anniversary, it's really brought it all back. She was 10, and you think, I wonder what she'd be like now, 50 years on. Wouldn't it be wonderful, you know, to think that she would have had a nice job and family, you know, and she's with me all the time. I go up to the cemetery and I put flowers, and I think, no, she's not up here. She's with me, wherever I am in the house, she's with me.
Marilyn Brown there, remembering her daughter Jeanette, who died that day. Well, here to talk to me now is Dennis Moss, who was here in Aberfan 50 years ago today, and you were very young, but you came to help. What do you remember of the day?
I remember there was a news flash. It was my mother's birthday on that day, the 21st, I could never forget it. She told me about it, and I remember that I needed to come and help. I felt that there's something needed to be done within the community as well. So I immediately got changed into my TA's uniform, knowing very well that they would let me through the gate here, the police. I got in here, and the first memory that struck me when I hit, it was devastation. I couldn't believe at the age of 18 what I'm looking at. Not knowing where to start, basically, you know. I was in the school, or on top of the school, couldn't remember, but I could see everybody working all around me in the school as well. And I had to make a decision, really, you know, that obviously nobody's going to tell me what to do. I have to get in there and help.
You just started digging?
And that's why I helped. And I started digging with the rest of them as well.
And did you bring out anyone alive?
No, I didn't, but there was a number of people that did, actually. And I know there was a young school teacher. I thought it was a school teacher, but I think she works in the school, and she actually took the impact of it because she had about 3 or 4 children in her arm and took the impact of that as well. And I would also carry bodies out as well from there, and we carried them into the makeshift mortuary, which was the chapel then at that time. So that's what I was doing.
Terrible experience for someone of that age. I mean, do you ever get over something like that? Do you think about it a lot?
No, you don't get over it, but you never forget it. I do think about it from time to time, but it only comes to my mind when I actually get involved in certain jobs with the children involved, and then that would bring it home to me. But other than that, you know, I just got on with my life, and being young, it was easier for me to cope with it. It could have gone the other way for me, but it was because being young, I found other interests, and so I managed to put it out of my mind.
And this is the first time you've returned to Aberfan since that day? This
is the first time. I work in the area, which is not far from here actually, and I'll pass this area, but I've never been down here. This is the first time I've come here, and it's a strange feeling just driving up here. And for the first time I met today, one of the survivors was grown up now, and I spoke to her as well. It was very emotional. We both gave each other a hug and a kiss as well, and that had a bit of a pull on me, that did.
You were pulling bodies out of the rubble.
I was helping to at that time, yeah.
And you were surrounded by parents and everyone working together.
Everybody's trying to work. I know there's parents involved, mums and dads, and people from the community. But there was a lot of positive sides as well that came from that. And one of the positive sides that I took from that is the fact no matter who you are, where you come from, what colour you are, or what language you speak, when something like that happens, we all come together and we work as one, as a family. And that's what's the positive side that I took out of here.
Dennis Moss, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, right now, there's a young choir singing in the community centre just behind me here in the village. Let's just take a listen to them. We'll give you that a little bit later. They've just finished. We just missed them. I'm so sorry about that. We'll try and show you some footage of that a little bit later. But in the meantime, that's it from me in Aberfan. For now, I'll be back a little bit later in the programme. We'll be reporting on the next generation who are remembering the history of this village. But for now, it's back to Nina.
Mary, thank you. The undercover reporter at the centre of stings against celebrities and royalty has been jailed for 15 months today for his involvement in the collapsed drugs trial of the singer Tulisa Kontos-Stavlos. The so-called fake sheikh Mazza Mahmood was found guilty of tampering with evidence. Sajal Karia was at the Old Bailey for today's sentencing. Sajal.
Well, the undercover reporter who fiercely guards his identity and who had a fearsome reputation for exposing the secrets of the rich and powerful with his controversial sting operations has today seen one of his own stings land him behind bars. There were shouts of "Your turn now, Mazza" from the public gallery as some of those that Mazza Mahmood had targeted over the years were there to see him sentenced. Afterwards, one of them, London burning actor John Alford, who spent 9 months in jail following one of Mahmood's stings, welcomed the judgment.
In 1984, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act was put in place to protect the public from unscrupulous and corrupt police officers. But there is nothing in place to protect us, the public, from unscrupulous and corrupt journalists.
Well, it was Mahmood's undercover investigation into the pop singer Tulisa Kontos-Stavlos that did for him. He'd accused her of setting up a drugs deal, which she'd always denied, and Mahmood was subsequently convicted of plotting to change a police statement to make her look guilty. Today, the man known as the fake sheikh begins a 15-month sentence in jail.
Sajal Karia, thank you. In the last hour, Theresa May has spoken of her commitment to cementing Britain's relationship with Europe after we leave the EU. Speaking after her first EU summit as Prime Minister, May admitted she was prepared for difficult moments as Brexit negotiations continue. The British Navy is shadowing a convoy of Russian warships as they pass through the English Channel on their way to Syria. HMS Duncan and HMS Richmond have been deployed to follow the flotilla in UK waters. The Conservatives have held David Cameron's seat in Witney, but with a much smaller majority. Robert Courts won the seat with 20,000 fewer votes than the former Prime Minister. And the former Coronation Street actress Tracy Brabin was elected Joe Cox's successor as Labour MP for Batley and Spen after the MP was killed there in June. To the American presidential race now, and an annual charity gala in New York is often the last time the two presidential nominees share a stage before Election Day. It's also traditionally a time when campaign hostilities are set aside. But not this year, not when it's Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. Here's our political correspondent, Paul Brand.
This time the stage was set for dinner, not debate. And even if the body language was no joke, this was a chance for the candidates to laugh off the campaign, even at the expense of Donald Trump's wife, accused of plagiarising that speech.
The media is even more biased this year than ever before. Michelle Obama gives a speech, and everyone loves it. It's fantastic. My wife, Melania, gives the exact same speech, and people get on her case.
But even after dessert, there was still the bitter taste of a campaign engulfed by scandals.
People look at the Statue of Liberty and they see a proud symbol. Donald looks at the Statue of Liberty and sees a 4. Maybe a 5 if she loses the torch and tablet and changes her hair.
Hillary is so corrupt. She got kicked off the Watergate Commission. I don't know who they're angry at, Hillary, you're right.
We'll find out the answer to that question in less than 3 weeks' time. A departing handshake briefly joining two candidates who couldn't be further apart. Paul Brand, ITV News.
Welcome back to Aberfan. A minute's silence was held here this morning to mark the exact moment a coal tip collapsed down a mountainside and onto houses and a school below, killing 116 children and 28 adults. Services have been held right across Wales today to mark the 50-year anniversary of the disaster. And in the last few minutes, a young choir has been singing in the community centre behind me. We can listen to that now. What happened here 50 years ago shook communities right across the Welsh valleys. Today, the disaster of 1966 is being taught in local schools. For the children of Ysgol Primary in Merthyr, just a few miles from here, today is a chance to learn more about the history of the community, as Rebecca Barry reports.
In a valley once traumatised by tragedy, the next generation are helping it heal.
We think we should remember the Aberfan disaster because we need to be grateful that it wasn't our school. Also to remember our loved ones who died in the tragic accident.
These children are the same age as some of those killed in the Aberfan disaster. It happened just a few miles away from here on a morning just like this, as the pupils began their school day. A landslide of coal, mud and debris engulfed the village of Aberfan, taking the lives of most of the children at Pantglas Junior School.
This morning we're going to be learning all about the Aberfan disaster, okay, and we're going to be using our thinking hats to discuss the issue surrounding the 50th anniversary.
116 children, and it happened on the 21st of October 1966.
I feel really sorry for the families who they know the people who died.
It's a difficult subject for these 10 and 11-year-olds, not least because many of them have relatives who are involved.
My grandpa, he went to dig up, try and save the bodies, so he digged up all the rubble, either barehanded or with a shovel, and I don't think he actually found anyone who survived, but the main thing was that he actually tried to help.
We're in Merthyr, aren't we? Do you think that makes it more important to us?
The children are encouraged to discuss their emotions, to express how the lesson made them feel.
You know, we don't want to traumatise the children. It's just raising awareness of not a celebration, but we should remember and kind of pass it on from generation to generation, and that we shouldn't forget.
This community doesn't want to be defined by what happened here 50 years ago. The next generation will go on remembering, whilst creating happier memories.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Well, joining me now is our Wales correspondent Rupert Evelyn. Rupert, this Aberfan story is hugely important right throughout Wales, isn't it, still today? And yet people haven't wanted to talk about it until now.
No, and quite understandably, many people will never talk about it. But there are those who I think on this anniversary have decided that it's important that history is recorded in the round. And therefore, for them to speak about what happened to them that day has been very important, not just for the history of Wales, but for the history for people's own personal families. So for very personal reasons, there has been a little change this time in which people have been willing to delve into their darkest memories.
And they don't want to be defined by what happened here, do they? They don't want Aberfan forever to be associated with disaster, with grief, with blackness.
Absolutely not. And for lots of people, October is always, every year, a difficult month, and so are many days throughout the year. But importantly, it doesn't define people, and there are lessons that were learned from here. Much of the health and safety law grew out of this disaster and is very important in how we behave in this country today, and the issues that it raised from Aberfan have become part of our life. So it is important that they aren't defined by it, even though they live with it.
Rupert Evelyn, thank you very much indeed. Well, something that strikes you here in Aberfan is how people, as Rupert said, were broken but not beaten by the horror of what happened on that terrible day, and how they found solace in one another. It was a spirit first seen in the moments straight after the landslide, as people rushed to join the scramble for survivors. Shoulder to shoulder, they searched, they dug, even children helped. And in the days that followed, support poured in from all over the world. Blankets were filled with money at football matches in the UK. Flowers arrived from countries all over the world. People came from far and wide to pay their respects here. A week after the disaster, the Queen met grieving parents. She had tea with locals here in their homes. She heard their stories and she was visibly moved with the Duke of Edinburgh there that day. Her greatest regret, we understand, was that she didn't come sooner. Well, today it was her son's turn to witness this remarkable community. And that's all from Aberfan this lunchtime. From everyone here in the team, goodbye.